By the end of this video, you'll know the exact 3 steps to safely buy your first Bitcoin today, even if you've never bought a single share of stock in your life. And the 3rd step, nobody tells beginners about it, but it's already cost over 1 million people everything they had. So grab a seat and let's get into it. Here's where most people start, paralyzed. They think buying Bitcoin requires understanding blockchain, cryptography, or finding the perfect entry price. None of that is true. The first thing you actually need is an account on a regulated exchange. That's it. Think of it like opening a brokerage account, except it takes 10 minutes and you can start with as little as $1. The most beginner-friendly option in the US is Coinbase. Over 110 million verified users as of 2024, essentially the Schwab of crypto. Kraken is a solid alternative if you want slightly lower fees. You sign up with an email, create a strong password, enable 2-factor authentication using an authenticator app, not SMS, never SMS, and verify your identity with a government ID. 5 to 10 minutes. Approval is usually instant. Here's something that surprises most first-timers. You don't need to buy a whole Bitcoin, not even close. 1 Bitcoin divides into 100 million smaller units called Satoshis. So when Bitcoin sits at $100,000, your $50 purchase still gets you 50,000 Satoshis. Real ownership, real Bitcoin, just a smaller slice. Fees matter here. Coinbase's basic interface charges around 1.5% per transaction. Switch to Coinbase Advanced Trade, same account, different interface, and that drops to a fraction of a percent. Worth knowing before your first purchase. One warning before you move on. Never click a link in an email claiming to be from your exchange. Type the address directly into your browser every single time. Phishing attacks are the #1 way beginners lose funds before they even get started, and unlike a bank, there's no fraud department to call. Now here's where it gets interesting, and where most people go wrong even after they've figured out how to buy. The biggest mistake new Bitcoin investors make isn't picking the wrong exchange. It's trying to time the market. Buying when it feels exciting, panicking when it drops, selling at the worst moment. Sound familiar? There's a strategy that sidesteps all of that. It's called dollar cost averaging, DCA, and it's genuinely boring. That's the point. Here's how it works. Instead of hunting for a perfect entry, you invest a fixed dollar amount at regular intervals, say $50 every week, no matter what the price is doing. When Bitcoin is expensive, your 50 buys less. When it crashes, your 50 buys more. Over time, your average cost smooths out and you stop losing sleep over daily swings. The numbers are hard to argue with. Someone who invested $50 a week starting January 1st, 2020 through January 1st, 2025 put in about $13,000 total. By early 2025, that position had grown to somewhere between $85,000 and $100,000. Now compare that to someone who put the same $13,000 in as a lump sum at Bitcoin's January 2021 peak near $42,000. Within a year, they were down 75%. The DCA investor went through the same crash, but at a much lower average cost. They recovered. They went into profit. The lump sum buyer who panic sold never did. Glassnode's on-chain data from the 2022 to 2023 bear market found that roughly 80% of retail investors who panic sold during that downturn never bought back in before the next bull run. They locked in losses and watched from the sidelines as Bitcoin hit $108,000 in December 2024. Here's the thing about that psychological battle. There's actually a word for surviving it: HODL. It comes from a December 2013 Bitcoin forum post by a user named GameQB, who was drunk, watching his investment crater, and typed, "I am hodling," a typo. That post reached millions and accidentally became the core philosophy of long-term Bitcoin investing. A drunk, terrified man at a keyboard in the middle of a crash, refusing to sell. That's it. That's the whole strategy. And it worked. Every major exchange, Coinbase, Kraken, Gemini, has a recurring buy feature. Set it once. It runs automatically. You stop making emotional decisions because there are no decisions left to make. One more thing worth knowing before we reach the last step. Bitcoin has only 21 million coins that will ever exist. As of early 2026, 19.8 million have already been mined. In April 2024, the network's mining reward was cut in half, a scheduled event called the halving. Historically, the 12 to 18 months following a halving have been Bitcoin's strongest price periods. That clock is already running. Every day you sit in cash waiting for. The right time is a day that window stays open without you. If this is clicking for you, hit subscribe. I put out videos like this every week, and the best part is still coming. Okay, remember how I said the third step was the one that's already cost over 1 million people their savings? Here it is. When you buy Bitcoin on an exchange and leave it there, you don't actually own Bitcoin. You own an IOU from that exchange. That distinction sounds technical until you understand what happened on November 11th, 2022. FTX was the second largest crypto exchange in the world, valued at $32 billion. Its CEO, Sam Bankman-Fried, had been on the cover of Forbes, testified before Congress, and was widely considered the responsible face of the industry. Then, in a single week, the exchange collapsed. Over 1 million customers logged in and found their accounts frozen. A teacher named Sunil Kavuri, who became one of the loudest creditor activists, described refreshing his screen and watching his savings disappear. He'd been planning to use that money to pay off his mortgage. Bankman-Fried was arrested the following month, tried, and sentenced to 25 years in prison in March 2024. The people who had moved their Bitcoin off FTX into personal hardware wallets before that week, they lost nothing. This isn't a new lesson. In February 2014, Mt. Gox, which processed 70% of all Bitcoin transactions globally, collapsed. 850,000 Bitcoin, gone. Creditors waited over 10 years for partial repayment. That repayment finally began in July 2024. Not your keys, not your coins isn't a slogan. It's a lesson written in decades of other people's losses. The solution is a hardware wallet, a device roughly the size of a USB drive. The two most trusted brands are Ledger and Trezor, priced between $79 and $149. You set it up, it generates a 24-word seed phrase, you write those words on paper and store them somewhere physically safe. That seed phrase is your Bitcoin, not a password you can reset, not an account you can recover, those 24 words. Lose them and the Bitcoin is gone forever. Someone finds them and it's theirs. There's a man in Newport, Wales named James Howells who threw away a hard drive in 2013 containing 8,000 Bitcoin. At current prices, that's roughly $800 million buried under 110,000 tons of garbage. He's offered the city council 25% of whatever he recovers to let him excavate. They've said no every time. The hardware wallet costs about $100. So here's where you are now. Step 1. Open a regulated exchange, complete verification, and buy your first amount. Start with whatever you'd spend on a dinner out. Step 2. Set up a recurring buy and let DCA do the work most investors can't do emotionally. Step 3. Once you're holding anything above $1,000 you plan to keep long-term, move it off the exchange into a hardware wallet you control. 3 steps. That's the whole map. And here's what those 3 steps actually give you, not just Bitcoin. For the first time in history, you can hold an asset that no bank can freeze, no exchange can gamble away, and no government can quietly inflate into worthlessness, because you hold the keys. That's not a feature most people knew they were missing until they needed it. Now you know. If this video helped, share it with someone who's been sitting on the sidelines, because historically, every version of that wait has been expensive. Subscribe so you don't miss the next one.